I've been wanting to make a baritone guitar for a while, and I've had a couple clients that it's almost happened, but it hasn't ever really happened yet. And so today I just decided, since I only have 600 other things going on, why don't I just make one anyways? I thought I would model it off of my bass 6, the George body style, because, you know, it's kind of in that family sort of, and I like this body style a lot. And so why don't we start by, I'll hop on the computer and show you what I did to design it first. Right now you're seeing a clip of George the 6th, the bass 6 that I made a while back. I'll put a link to the full video, but you can see what it is. It's basically tuned like a guitar, E, A, D, G, B, E, but down an octave in the bass range. And the scale length is a little bit in between, and you can kind of play it a little bit in between. Now what I'm going to make today is a baritone guitar, which is actually in between the low bass, or the bass 6, and the regular guitar. So the lowest note on a bass guitar is like a low E, and then an octave higher E on the guitar. And this is the B, right in between those notes is the lowest string. So it's like literally right in the middle of those registers. Okay, let's take a look at my file here. You can see I'm using Aspire by Vectric, which is what I do all my designing in. And nowadays the modern version has the Sheets function, so I can actually have all of my different files in one complete setup here. So this is sort of my main body file. You can see I started with that bass 6 George shape, but I made it just a little bit shorter and a little bit different. I can actually pull up, this was the last bass 6 that I made, and if I copy that file and put it right here, you can see it's a little bit bigger, just a little bit, not a lot. And I had to change the neck pocket and all the electronics and stuff, of course, too. But it just sort of made sense to make it a little bit smaller. And I was doing these sort of like 80s shapes that you can see here, this sort of triangular shape. And originally I was just going to use a pickup I had laying around, and I thought I really liked that shape and these angles, and so I thought I would create this custom pickup to go in there as well, like a split coil, sort of like what's on a Fender P bass, but for guitar. So this is all my main file, and then I go over here and you can see I made the fingerboard in a separate file, and I use those shapes again as inlays, or I'm going to when I get to making it. This is a 27.5-inch scale on the low strings and a 27-inch scale on the high strings, so it's a slightly fanned fret. But I plan on just using a regular guitar bridge, so I have the entire angle starting at the nut side and slowly straightening out so it gets straight at the bridge. This is a trick I've done before, and it's kind of gives you like a best of both worlds. So the frets are straight up and down, your bridge is straight up and down, where I like to have them, but then you just have that little bit of an ergonomic sort of curve down here at the lower set of frets. And then my neck, I used my basic 6-inline guitar neck, but I had to modify it and make it a little bit longer and whatnot. And so you can see that this is a 3D model, and it's all pretty much ready to get cut out. I just have to actually do it. And then once I created all these files, I was able to go up here and create a separate sheet where I took all the shapes that I needed for the pick guards and for the plastic parts, and then I was able to import these over on my laser. You can see here on the guitar headstock, I plan on inlaying a little plate right there with my logo and the name of the instrument model. Usually I make the whole guitar first and then the pick guards and all the extra pieces afterwards and the pickups and whatnot, but this time I did it in reverse because my CNC was busy, which was fine, except for I did make a mistake that we'll talk about a little bit later. Taking the dive into making my own pickups has really been great because it gives me opportunities to do things like this where I can on the fly just create a really special design for a special instrument. I have some other videos where I talk a little more about the process of making pickups, and I'm going to make this one like a humbucker, so each separate half is wound the opposite direction and the poles are the opposite direction. It'll give it a cleaner signal, like a P-bass. This isn't really any harder, you just have to pay attention to make sure you don't mess up the direction you're going, and I took some notes and wrote them right on the pickup part so I wouldn't screw up. Because these shapes are a little different, I had to sort of mess around with getting it centered so it would spin good, and I did okay. I started with 5,000 winds per coil, which is pretty standard for a humbucker, but what I didn't think about is the fact that I was only winding half the length. So those 5,000 winds was actually a lot shorter than 5,000 winds on a normal humbucker pickup, and I was getting a pretty low output, so I decided to undo the ends, solder on some more wire, which you then coat with a little bit of lacquer to protect it, and wind it again. So then I wound them up to 10,000 per side, and I was getting a much higher output and a better reading. That's 5.71K per half, so together they'll be over 11K. I also have to magnetize the Alnico 5 pole, so I just have this simple little setup in a vise, and you just move it between the magnets in the same direction, usually about 50 times, and you get a nice reading. But then I want to make sure the other one is in the opposite direction, so I just flipped it upside down and did the same thing. So now one set has north on the top, and the other set has south on the top. Then I dipped them in hot wax to pot them. I have this one piece of acrylic left over from a desk I was able to get my hands on and reclaim. It was like a television studio show desk. And this is all I have left. It's an odd shape. It's got some flaws in it. So what I did is I cut out a cardboard template of the body I want to cut. And that's the center of the CNC file right there, that little dot. So I can figure out where this is going to fit, which looks like right about there, which should be okay. I can mark that, and then that's going to be my center point where I start cutting. There we go. The acrylic is only 1 inch thick, so for the electronics cavity, I actually just cut a hole all the way through the instrument. I'm going to put a cover on the back and the front, and that just makes it a little easier to fit that 1/4 inch jack in there. I removed some tabs with a flush trim router bit, and then I switched that out for a chamfered bit so I could just put a slight edge on all the sides, but I had to be very careful not to get too close to the neck pocket where it gets very thin. The desk had this sticky blue contact paper on it that has given me a hard time in the past, but this time I did the same thing I always do and just used some mineral spirits to loosen up the goo, and it came off real easy. I drilled a hole to run the wires from the pickup into the cavity, and I was really excited to see what this was going to look like, so I started piecing it together to get my first look, and that's when I realized this. The only way that these fit is like this. I made them upside down with all the wiring on the top instead of the bottom. Which wouldn't be a big deal except for these holes. I realized very quickly the easiest fix was going to be to just remake the pickups properly, but I will use these on another guitar in the future. I can just flip the hole and make it work. I made another set careful to check my work as I went before I started to wind them in, and these are going to work out just fine. Nice. Got a nice 11K resistance on this. It's pretty hot. And you can see the way I designed it, that I put the higher pitch strings I put closer to the neck than these strings, although they really do line up almost straight. But normally when guitars slant pickups, they slant them towards the bridge like this, so the higher strings poles are closer to the bridge. But I did it sort of in reverse because this is about a lower frequency for this instrument, and so I just want to make a sort of universal position pickup, kind of hopefully hitting the sweet spot. Here you go, there's his little brother. Just a little bit smaller. I think that looks pretty cool, and unfortunately this is where I have to end this video. I obviously still have to make the neck, and we can talk a little bit more about some of the things that went into that design when I do that in a future video, but I gotta get back to my other 600 things. I wanted to share this with you now just to kind of show you what was going on. I thought it was kind of a fun project, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on it, but what I really want to hear are your name suggestions for it. I have a couple ideas. Bari, either spelled B-A-R-I or B-A-R-R-Y, is too on the nose, so just skip that one. But I'd love to hear what you think I should call this in the comments. All right, thanks a lot and be good.